Welcome to the NAIOP Southern Nevada April breakfast program. I can't believe it's April already. I'm Matthew Hoyt, and I'm serving as your chapter president this year. Good morning to everyone here at the Orleans and to everyone joining by Zoom. For all of you that are here in the room today, you'll find notepads at your tables. Please write down any questions you'll have during the program, and Dan Tutland with the Programs Committee will collect them for our Q&A session, which will wrap up the program from 9 o'clock to 9:15. We want to recognize our students, UNLV students in attendance today. I'm told we have 21 students in attendance. If you're a student, please stand and welcome to NAIOP. Everyone, the students will have green ribbons on their name tags. If you see them in the room, please welcome them to NAIOP this morning. Let's take a moment to recognize and honor our President's Circle sponsors. They're a critical component to the success of our chapter. This year we have 5 platinum sponsors. A special thank you to each one. City of North Las Vegas, a new platinum sponsor this year. Cox Business has supported our chapter for over 21 years. Gatsky Commercial since 2022. Martin Harris Construction since 2001. And Schnitzer Properties since 2000. We'd also like to thank our 8 gold sponsors: Burke Construction Group, EBS Realty Partners, Heller Companies, Howard Hughes, Kimley Horn and Associates, Majestic Realty Company, Prologis, and Southern Nevada Water Authority. Thank you to our 8 gold sponsors. Now, please look at the screen as we recognize our silver sponsors, our bronze sponsors, and our copper level President's Circle sponsors. I'm still happy to report that support from our President's Circle sponsors has reached an all-time high in 2025 with exposure to over 700 members. There's never been a better time to be a President's Circle sponsor. You can still become a 2025 President's Circle sponsor. If you're interested, please stop at the registration table for a package or talk to Lisa Brady at Prologis, Katrina, or Jana. And now to our committees. Can I please ask our committee leaders to come to the microphone for announcements?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyson O'Neill with CBRE. I'm up here on behalf of the bus tour committee. Save the date for Thursday, November 13th. We are just starting to plan the bus tour. If you're interested in joining, please reach out to Morgan Elson with Colliers or myself. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Guy Gugino with MidFirst Bank. I'm here for the golf committee. We are sold out. The tournament's on May 16th at Paiute. So I have to change what I'm saying. I'm not allowed to say raffle prize anymore. So it is a drawing prize. We are looking for drawing prizes in a value of more than $100. You can go to the website. We have a link for an Amazon shop, or if you have clients or would like to promote yourself, we'd really appreciate it. And we do also need members as volunteers for the event. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm here representing the membership committee. We are going to do our social event at the Aviators game Thursday, May 1st. We still have a couple sponsorships left. If you haven't been before, we have the third level deck, party deck, food, drinks. If you're not, this is a member and non-member event, so if you come on out and mix and mingle, and if you're not a member of NAIOP, you should be. We'll see you all there. Thanks again, Thursday, May 1st.
I heard that if you have a sticker on this morning that you absolutely have to register for the Aviators event, so please do that. Each month we like to recognize our new members. If you're a new member, please stand and welcome to NAIOP. If you see a red ribbon on name tags, please be sure to welcome our new members. I'm happy to report that after the annual membership non-renewal drops, our chapter had the 4th best retention percentage nationally. We're now ranked as the 7th largest chapter, currently 724 members strong. A quick thank you to our membership committee for continuing to tout the value of NAIOP membership and push on those member renewals. If your membership was dropped, this is your invitation to rejoin us. And if you've never been a member, now's the time. There are a few ways. You can stop at the registration table for an application. You can visit our website and join online. You can call the NAIOP office, or you can reach out to anyone with the membership committee ribbon on their name tag today. We'd also like to thank our 2025 breakfast meeting sponsors, American Nevada Realty, Carpenter Sellers Delgado Architects, City of North Las Vegas, Cox Business, Martin Harris Construction, NV Energy, Panettone Development, Schnitzer Properties, Southern Nevada Water Authority, the Whiting Turner Contracting Company, and our Wi-Fi sponsor, Gatsky Commercial. And a special thank you to this morning's meeting sponsor, American Nevada Realty, who is also a bronze President's Circle sponsor this year. I'd like to introduce Natalie Stagnita, Vice President of Property Management.
Good morning. Many of you know American Nevada as a master plan developer. But once upon a time, we managed properties that we own, but that has changed. Now we are a third-party property management company offering the same owner mentality to our clients. Thank you, NAIOP, for letting us be a sponsor today, and remember, American Nevada, third-party property management.
Thank you once again to American Nevada Realty. As you guys know, our programs committee has been putting out the best programs in the market this year. So let's segue into today's panel. One last reminder, we do have the Q&A session at the end of the program for our in-person attendees. There's pens and paper at your tables, which will be collected. Q&A starts at 9 and will conclude at 9:15. I'm excited for our program today, Building Up or Sprawling Out, the Southern Nevada Growth Debate. A real talk about infill and high density and its future in Southern Nevada. This has been a major topic of discussion for our chapter for well over a decade now. We have an excellent panel of experts led by our one and only President-elect Steve Neiger moderating today's discussion. Steve is a principal and managing broker at CAST. He is born and raised here in Las Vegas and specializes in retail sales and leasing. He's an active investor in commercial properties and is currently involved in numerous redevelopment projects throughout the valley. I've got a lot more to read here about you, buddy. His experience in retail and mixed-use projects, along with his familiarity with the density in Las Vegas's most famous corridors, including Chinatown, downtown Las Vegas, and the Las Vegas Strip, make him invaluable in moderating today's discussion. He and his team are 6-time recipients of NAIOP's Retail Broker of the Year Award. He's been recognized as our Developing Leader of the Year, Associate Member of the Year, and recipient of our Special Recognition Award, as well as NAIOP National's Volunteer of the Year. He's a CCIM designee and a longtime member of ICSC. He's been instrumental to our government affairs efforts and is an alumni of our amazing DLI program. As I previously mentioned, he currently serves on our board of directors as the president-elect. Hopefully he's not getting too red over there with all the accomplishments and praise. I'm also extremely happy to call Steve a good friend. Welcome to the stage, Steve Neiger.
Thanks for that, man. Thanks a lot. All right, let's get our panelists up here and get this party started. Guy Martin is the president of Martin Harris Construction. Not sure if anyone has heard of them, but they've got a great team over there. Guy's been at the heart of the company since 1982 and has consistently been a dedicated leader in our industry's professional organizations, from contractors boards to chambers of commerce. He also oversees Martin Harris's philanthropic initiatives, which I thank you for, Guy. Welcome. Frank Marretti. Sure, let's do that. He deserves it. Frank Marretti is the founder of G2 Capital Development and is one of the few guys in this town who has built infill, high-density, mixed-use projects. Maybe the only guy in the last decade. I didn't verify that, but maybe. He has been involved in construction and real estate development since he was just a kid. He has literally built every product type you can think of, and he's also a deal junkie, so he has something in common with the rest of us degenerate brokers out there. John Restrepo is the principal of... You're okay, I called you a deal junkie, right? I'm good. Okay. John Restrepo is the principal of RCG Economics, where he has analyzed economic and real estate trends across the southwestern United States for the last 37 years. Based in Southern Nevada, he is an economist first and foremost, whose clients include prominent members of both the private and public sectors. He has done several Southern Nevada land studies over the years, not just for NAIOP, but for economic development agencies as well. Please welcome our great panelists. All right. Now the truth. I have a confession to make to everyone in this room. I lied to you. I lied to all of you. The truth is that in Southern Nevada, sprawl is not a thing, and there probably won't ever be such a thing. If you'll direct your attention to the screens, that side and that side, you'll see a beautiful, colorful map. All the color, that is where we cannot build. Okay? If you look at that legend on the side, we've got National Monument, National Conservation Area, biological areas, cultural areas, desert tortoise areas, BLM wilderness, Forest Service wilderness, National Park wilderness, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Reclamation, some city and county properties, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, National Park Service. Are you guys bored yet? When you look at this map and you hear an expert like Mike Ford, who is a conservationist at heart but is an expert in land and all things land, say that we've done more for conservation than any other state in the history of the United States, well, suddenly that statement makes sense. NAIOP Southern Nevada, as Matt said, has been working tirelessly for years on issues that are of vital importance to our business community and industry, and for years the primary issue has been the lack of available land. Surprisingly, there are opponents to our calls for more lands because we've been calling for more land immediately. People think that we don't need more land and that the future is vertical and all we need to do is build vertical, not out. So we decided to explore that conversation and get into the details with literally the experts, the foremost experts in town on these things. The folks who know all about density, about vertical construction, and the economics of it all. I know that was long-winded, so let's get to it. We are going to set the table a bit with our resident economist, Mr. Restrepo, and then get into the weeds with Guy and Frank. John, you've got an image up here, but you're the guy to explain this. Can you tell us how unique we are in terms of this land situation and how we got to talking about density?
Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Oh, good. Okay, it's working. Yeah, we're very unique. We all know this already. It's always in the back of our minds here at our firm, but I'm sure everyone. Nevada is a unique state, and Las Vegas, Southern Nevada is even more unique in terms of federal ownership. So the fact that we have lots of land to develop is really not true compared to other states. And so we start with that premise. I think 89 to 90% of Clark County is controlled by the federal government, various federal agencies. And so that being in of itself, it means that we're very limited in terms of our land resources. And it's been like that for many, many years. And we've known it. We just have not done as much as we could have, to be honest with you, move things along in terms of getting more land release, although that's now accelerating. But yeah, we're a very unique situation here. Our density, though, believe it or not, because I know Steve was going to ask me a question on density. Well, I had one of my guys look at the number of the population per square mile in Southern Nevada versus other 35 or 36 cities in the Western U.S. We're right in the middle of the pack. We're about number 13 out of 36 in terms of our density. We're about 4,000 people per square mile. The worst one, let me look at that's obviously San Francisco, 19,000 people per square mile. And the lowest density is Scottsdale, 1,400 people. And so we're right in the middle of the pack in terms of density. So the question then becomes is, what do we need to do to develop? How do we develop? Do we develop just in greenfield development, which is euphemistically called sprawl, which has got a lot of negative connotations, which is kind of a BS term anyway, or do we match it up with redevelopment and infill development? So that's really the topics of discussion today. It's kind of a two-pronged approach in how we deal with this. And real quickly before we get into this, and these guys will be able to talk to the construction side, going up sounds really cool because you see that in New York and in LA and Chicago and places like that, but it's expensive, the rents are high, the prices are high, and then we have to match those pricing and plus the HOA fees of those kind of units, whether the rentals or for sale, to the income of our population. So we have a relatively low-wage, low-skilled workforce for the most part, and so that's difficult to, align those two things, those kind of rents and prices versus with our income. So building up as a solution to everything is not really, it can be a part of the answer, but it's not much of an answer, to be honest with you. Not in the concepts of Southern Nevada today.
We like to complain about how expensive land and everything else is. We're very good at that, I think. But let's talk about economic development for a sec, because I don't think folks understand where we're at right now in somewhat of the predicament. Lost opportunities already because of this land constraint that we're experiencing. Let's start with that. In economic development, what we use as tools here compared to other states that we lose business to sometimes. Whatever you want.
Go ahead, Frankie, jump in.
Yep, that's you, Frank.
Yeah. So it was. I was referring specifically to lost opportunities. LVGEA put out a study about how much. What was the number? Like $1 billion.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. So LVGEA studied basically what opportunities do we miss because we don't have the ability to incentivize in Southern Nevada like other municipalities do. For me, I tend to be the wet blanket on land. Without land, the incentives don't matter. Every 1 million square foot building requires 100 acres. So if you think about just that in broad contrast, we don't have 100-acre tracts of land. We don't have 250, 300 acres. We have them, but we can talk a little bit later about the difference between dirt and real estate, whether or not you can actually, it's buildable land. Which I think is the largest risk with the lands bill right now is that we're going to get a whole bunch of, pardon the expression, shit dirt, and we're not even going to get it cheap. The way that the federal government has to discharge land is so archaic that there's no way to offset the cost of turning bad dirt into buildable real estate. And so there's many issues with getting land back from the federal government, but the reality of it is, are we missing deals? Yes. I would also point out to what John said, we economically and from a pay rate standpoint, we have a hard time attracting people to Southern Nevada. We don't have a lot of high-paying professional level jobs. And honestly, somebody should trend this. I would tell you that pay rates are rising with the price of land. When we had cheap dirt, you had low-paying jobs. When we have expensive dirt, because we're running out of it, the pay rate for those jobs will go up because the skill set to be in that higher revenue producing mindset will go up. So there's a lot of things that flow through this, but yeah, land is a real deal, but the shackles that the federal government throw on you, be careful what we're asking for.
Mm-hmm. And if I could just jump in to kind of give some context to what Guy is saying. The most recent study we did on the land thing was for GOET. It was built basically an extension or expansion of what we did for GOET, for NAIOP earlier. And the GOET study showed that we did in 2023, they wanted us to know how much land would be available between 2023 and 2030. It's a short time frame, a certain size, certain slope, with certain access to roads and all those sorts of things, a minimum of 20 acres. and we found that there were about 16,000 acres in southern Nevada that met those criteria. It was a very targeted, focused study. Of those 16,000 acres, we ranked them 1 through 4, 1 being the best kind of land and 4 being okay. We had 0 land left in the 1 category. The number 2 category, which was decent, we had about 5,000 acres, and there's about 10,000 acres. That land was kind of, in our opinion, substandard for the types of users that we need. So this issue of land is really critical. And it's, Guy's absolutely right. It's size and shape and location and slopes and all these things come into play from an employment land standpoint. The residential guys have a little more flexibility because they can build more higher density, build on sides of hills. They're not as worried about the slope as the commercial guys are. But that is a huge component in all of this, combined with the skilled labor force question, which is always underlying everything. So it's land and skilled labor force is really the bigger issues we're dealing with.
So I know we're talking about lands. Everybody in this room that worries about development worries about density and every day and how we get there. And one more piece on this economic development tool, because we talk about Southern Nevada and Austin and these other towns in Texas, and I think Texas is a good example. We've got GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We've got the LVGEA. We've got several organizations whose entire job is to bring companies to our state in Southern Nevada. Do they have the same tools that a place like Texas has?
No. I mean, they have none. I've been in the room when those things have been compared of this is what Texas will do, or this is what a little teeny tiny town in Texas will do. All of that is predicated off of private land. Everything that you hear Phoenix doing, everything that you hear other markets doing, it's privately owned land that they have at a basis that allows them to provide. Remember, the incentives aren't gifts. They're offset by something. There has to be a give and a take, right? If you get a tax incentive, that's to offset using a challenged piece of dirt or a piece of land that's super expensive for a use. There's always a give and take trying to get back to a basis of zero, but we don't have the same incentives that other places have because our land is so constrained. And there isn't, I think Tom and what he's doing with GOED and what the governor currently is doing with GOED, they're on the right path. They're not providing a lot of incentives for stuff we already do in this state. Mm-hmm. And so they are using what little incentives they have, trying to bolster and bring in economic solutions that we don't currently have in our state.
Good. Yeah, the only thing else I would add to that, I don't know, Frank, if you're going to say something. The only other thing I would add to that is this is kind of one of those dirty little secrets we don't like to talk about in Nevada. We're not the most regulatory friendly state in the country. Our tax base is pretty low in terms of our tax structure is pretty business friendly, but the regulatory, permitting, occupational licensing, all those sorts of things that businesses have to deal with when they enter a community, we're not that great. As a matter of fact, there are a number of studies that have been done by think tanks back in D.C. that we fall in the bottom half of the country in terms of how friendly we are to business in terms of our regulatory structure. And so even in a case comparing ourselves to California, in certain communities in California, they're more business-friendly regulatory-wise than we are here. Phoenix is much more, for example, so is Salt Lake, Denver, and other places. So we have to also look at that as well. It's not only our land issue and our skilled labor, but what is in our regulations and permitting laws, zoning, things like that are getting in the way, that are discouraging companies from coming here. We've heard some complaints when we talk to site selectors that they're surprised when they get here. They love Las Vegas, they love the climate, they love everything. They start looking at some of the regulations on getting things built and they go, oh my God, we didn't realize it was so tough. And so we have to also look at our regulatory structure as well as part of this package of things we need to do.
You did mention tax revenue before we move on. If you look at this map, and by the way, thank you to GCW for providing that map. They provided it to NAIOP completely free of charge, and it's a very valuable map because I hadn't seen anything like it before. John, real quick, land that's owned by the government versus privately held land in terms of local tax revenue, Can you touch on the
Well,
difference?
yeah, you have that. I mean, if it's federal land, it's not producing any tax revenue as privately held land in terms of property taxes. But I think more critical is what Guy said earlier. There's a disconnect because of the federal procedures for releasing land and how long it takes to get things auctioned off and put into the auction process and made available and all those sorts of, and the time frame that the businesses operate in, right? Businesses operate in 3 to 5 year planning horizons, not 10 to 15 year. And so there is right there in and of itself all the quote unquote land that we want to access that are developable land that's federally owned here in Southern Nevada. And there is a decent amount, for example, but it takes time for that to get going, and businesses don't work on those kind of time frames. So that's the other thing that needs to be addressed at some point at the federal level, because it's out of the control of us down here. And guys, again, is absolutely right. In places like Texas and Arizona, you may have a state land agency, but they're much easier to deal with than the federal government is, obviously. And so how do we deal with that the disconnect between the demands of businesses and business and the economy and the bureaucracy of the federal government? That's a tough one. That's a real tough one.
I'm really curious about, I wish we had someone from one of the governments up here. I don't know what the property tax and other revenue, sales tax revenue. Obviously, if you're sitting on a piece of dirt, it's not generating sales tax revenue. I'm sure that the property taxes are nominal compared to something that's actually got businesses on it paying taxes, and I think that's important as well. But I started off joking about sprawl, but I want to ask what sprawl is, to explain to the crowd. What is sprawl, John?
Sprawl is like porn is in the eye of the beholder. Remember that old expression from years ago? They couldn't identify porn because the judge said it was in the eye of the beholder. I don't know why that popped into my mind. I got to stay off the internet late at night.
I'm worried about what popped into all of their minds. I mean, that was
Exactly.
pretty similar response.
Yeah, I guess you guys. I'm not going to say anymore. Yeah, I mean, sprawl is a real thing, but we are not when you look at sprawl, to me, you look at places like Phoenix or Houston, they go from miles and miles. I mean, tens and 20, miles out. The metro areas we're very relatively compact here. So yes, we're going to have to go beyond the valley's boundaries to do a Tesla if we wanted a Tesla here or one of those bigger users. But that's just the nature of the game. So sprawl in the context of Southern Nevada is kind of a red herring that we shouldn't really be paying attention to, because it's kind of bullshit, to be honest with you. I know some of the more the left side of folks who already here want everything to be built up, and we don't have sprawl in their environmental communities. And they're mixed. Some of the environmental community are saying we need to expand, and they're not all under one umbrella in terms of being anti-sprawl. The more realistic ones understand that to have a healthy community, a healthy environment, you have to have a healthy economy, right? If you look around the country and you look at communities that struggle environmentally with pollution and all these other things that they're dealing with, they generally are poor communities. They're not communities that are well off. They can take care of all these issues because they have good tax revenues and spending, have a strong GDP, if you want to call it that. And so the blend between environmental progress and economic progress are kind of tied in together. And so the more rational environmentalists say, yeah, we need growth. We need to protect the human environment as well, just not the natural environments. We have to have human beings, right, living here. And so the sprawl thing, I think, is not as much of an argument as it used to be. It's still there, but people kind of understand there was a simplistic answer that we don't want sprawl. Mm-hmm. Because they saw things happening in certain cities years ago, and they wanted to prevent it from happening again. It's not as much a bigger issue as it is. The bigger issue is things of skilled labor force and all those sorts of things. That's really the important part.
So Now, for the rest of my life, I have the definition of sprawl in my head, and it's John Restrepo's definition.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. The opposite of that is high density, right? And density, just to be clear, it's very simple. How many bodies do you have on a square acre, square mile, whatever measurement you want to use? It's the more bodies, the more dense, right? And that's why vertical towers have higher density. Guy, your team is one of the best in the state at building complex, high-density projects, probably one of the best in the country, right? And Frank, you're one of the few who's actually done it in this town as a developer. So I want to get into the basics of that right now. And we're going to start off super elementary. A lot of this will probably make sense immediately. But let's talk about commercial real estate. Very simple question. What can go vertical? What can't in terms of office, retail, industrial?
I think it's really clear, anything that can pencil, right? No, I'm joking.
Okay.
But in all honesty, I think in our town, the most logical vertical development is residential and office, but office is a dirty word right now. So the residential side is clearly student housing, assisted living, senior housing, just normal market rate apartments. The challenge is getting them to pencil because of the cost of vertical is significantly higher than horizontal development.
What about retail and industrial?
Retail, the ground floor, but vertical retail just doesn't really work in very many places in this country at all. Obviously, having a retail component to a vertical mixed-use project does work, although it has its challenges when you're not able to pull right up to a storefront and your customer base is accustomed to pulling straight up to a parking spot, walking 20 feet and going in. Trying to put them into a garage setting, unless it's a strip property, casino property, becomes very challenging. And so for the everyday user, retail has to be convenient in that high-rise type project. And it is a challenge. We've learned out on Maryland Parkway, retail is it's challenging on Maryland Parkway at the University District in general, but you throw that into a parking structure that's not located at the front of the space, traffic patterns, people's habits, it creates, certainly its challenges for retail.
Yeah, and from a construction standpoint, I've always told our clients, look, from like 0 to 5, 6 stories, you can talk about wood, you can get hydraulic elevators, the cost is pretty marginal, you can kind of control that. But there's this no-no zone that happens at like, I'll say 6 to 14 floors. That's where all the high-rise designation kicks in. That's where you have active smoke control instead of passive smoke control. You have pressurized corridors and stairwells and traction elevators instead of hydraulic elevators. And all of those things are cost, right? There's only 2 ways to build up that high. It's either steel or concrete. Steel is super inefficient because you lose square footage. Your building grows higher to hide the structure. So that's why you see concrete used so much. But there's so much infrastructure that goes into those things for like everything from concrete forms to tower cranes that if you don't get the land basis right, you can't offset that difference. And then the density for you to go up, that's why there's like this area, and like I said, I call it the no-no zone. We don't build between like 7 and 14. It seems like at 14 floors is where that flips over. Well, then you add the complexity of the water moratorium, and now you don't have a cooling system for a building over 14 floors. So I mean, there's just this compounding thing, and to Frank's point, really the only spot you have to make adjustments in rents to offset that cost is in residential, and there's only so many people in the market that can afford to live in that. I remember back when we built our very first high-rise condo, there's 282 units. And the developer, who was very, very bullish when they came into town, he says, that means I have to have the best sales team ever, and I only got to find 300 tenants. I only got to find 300 people to buy my condos. And I said, okay, great. So we build it, we're done. 11 people moved in the building. Because at the end of the day, those 300 people still have to pay their mortgage. And if their pay rate isn't at a certain level, they can't pay their mortgage. The philosophy was flawed. And that's one of the challenges you run into. When you look at these big BLM sales and you look at Snippewa land getting distributed, why do home buyers buy that? They're the ones that have the ability to hit the density to offset the cost of the land. Plain and simple.
We're going to move on to costs here in a sec, but I had one question for Guy. You probably know more about industrial than you ever intended or thought you would know in the history of industrial development.
I know concrete and dirt.
All right. Well, have you built industrial before?
Yeah, a few.
We've built millions and millions of square feet here, and I think we all understand it's one floor. That's probably still the future of industrial, right? Are there places where multi-story industrial work?
So I will say I've seen some studies on multi-story industrial. I've seen most of it really works on like a final mile use when you can have a niche use as a bulk source of square footage. I don't see that happening a lot. You know, and again, there's all kinds of regulations about what you can do on this piece of property for parking and all these other pieces that come in for compliance that there aren't a lot of solutions for. So, yeah, I don't see industrial being multi-story. What I do think is that we're going to see a lot of creative. Adaptive reuse, I think, is the term that the real estate world has used for stuff they can't explain why it works. And when I go to these different conferences and stuff, and we go tour adaptive reuse, it's like, okay, that's pretty cool. But usually what's happened, and I was at Icon a couple, 3 weeks ago, and we were walking through a building that has been completely reimagined as kind of this marine ecosystem and studying everything having to do with water and all of that stuff. And I asked myself, how could you ever get a rent low enough for a nonprofit to have a waterfront 200,000 square foot warehouse with the city as a partner? Bankruptcy. Somebody owned it. That's the only way it works. That's the great Control-Alt-Delete of land value is bankruptcy. That's the only way that works. We're not having a lot of that happen here. That's very good. But I think that's where the adaptive reuse, that's the only way you fund it. You have to get the land. You have to get the economics. To Frank's point, it has to pencil. And the only way it pencils is you have to hit the Control-Alt-Delete. You have to reset the value on the land somehow. And that's a challenge.
Speaking of penciling, costs. Everybody hears about low-rise and mid-rise and high-rise, and I think they refer to office as that sometimes, but obviously in residential. Can you guys give us sort of a background of the cost differential as you go from low to mid to high and whatever that means? Like, does it get more expensive per square foot as you get higher?
I think to Guy's point, there's a break point, right? So if you are trying to build a 6 to 10-story high-rise, your price per square foot blended is going to be higher than if it's a 18-story high-rise. Right. Because once we break that threshold into type 1 construction, the necessity building systems are super expensive. The elevator banks are critical to understand how many square foot of area per floor are you serving per elevator bank. So if you have a small footprint, your costs are, so it's all in the design. I do believe, without a doubt, the higher you can go, the more economies of scale we can pick up. But our city's not really prepared for that type of density per project. There's not qualified occupants in line that can afford to pay for that, generally speaking, in the areas that we've been working in here. Looking in the Phoenix, Scottsdale market, it's a whole different ballgame. There are 6-story, 7-story type 1 constructed buildings all over the place, and there are waiting lists for people to get in, and there are qualified residents and occupants that can afford to move into those buildings. So Salt Lake's a little bit different, but still similar to the Phoenix, more similar to the Phoenix market than the Las Vegas market.
The U on Maryland Parkway.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. it wasn't a cheap build, right? And you've got residential, office, and retail.
Correct. Correct.
So can you, I think a lot of folks were very excited and happy that you did that, and a lot of folks were scratching their head. And can you kind of give us some takeaways of the challenges that were there? Because there were challenges, but it's a triumph story. It's a great story, but I think that it's
Yeah.
worth telling some.
And your therapist said you'd never have to talk about it.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I'm going to have a.
Nice.
I'm going to book a session here.
We're going to have to pass the hat for your copay.
I'm going to book a session right when we leave. First and foremost, for anybody out there thinking of going high-rise, especially in this town, make sure you pick the right contractor. Unfortunately for me, I picked the wrong contractor, and the right contractor wasn't available for 8 months because of the right team, and I picked the wrong straw, and it cost me dearly. But it worked out at the end, fortunately, as well. So that's a big that's a big challenge in this town. I think when we focus on Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, primarily Nevada. Comparing contractors, Arizona has overall 5-to-1 contractor base compared to Las Vegas when you're looking at all the subs and so forth. But it's a much bigger market. So there's the subcontracting pool in Arizona compared to here, there's a lot more qualified subs that can do the type of work we're trying to do non-union, because we're not really in the world of the public union wages. That's a huge challenge, right? We certainly, in the medical district, for instance, a project that we've been working on there for years, and certainly the university district, we certainly underestimated the ability of tenants to pay the rent that's required on high-rise construction. And that is a big challenge when you really get down to it. And I think the other side for us is, the site constraints, right? It's challenging, right? Guy has to come in and build a project. When you don't have staging areas, when you have to stage 2 miles away and truck stuff in and shut roads down and road closures, and it all adds up. And it adds up tremendously over 18 to 24 months that you don't necessarily see that coming, at least the first time you do it.
You see it after that.
You see it after that. Every time you shut your eyes, you see it.
You got a checklist on it.
Yep. Did you have something? Okay. So you mentioned EVAP, the moratorium that NAIOP was very involved in, and true situation where community and the public sector and the private sector came together to a reasonable solution. But I think folks hear density and they think, well, it saves more water. You have less swimming pools and less trees and plants, and we've banned grass, we've banned evaporative cooling systems. I think folks don't understand evaporative cooling technologies and their necessity in high-density facilities. So there's got to be an alternative, right? How does that work? Can you explain moving away from evaporative cooling for high-density projects and what the alternative is?
So just first off, small disclaimer, I'm not an engineer. I don't even claim to be one. I do fully embrace common sense and making it common again. So this is more of a common sense approach. The high density evaporative cooling systems, what that allowed us to do was get chilled water into coils within the mechanical system at high elevations through pumps and various other engineered means to allow us to be able to provide cool air into the highest points of a building. The closed loop mechanical systems that you see for high density use are limited on that. Those mechanical systems can't move coolant like Freon or whatever the case may be as far as a piped hydronic system can. You can't keep this, what the term they use is the splits, what temperature it is when it leaves the condenser or the chiller in the yard to what temperature it is when it reaches the air handler in the room. You can't maintain those splits. So the mechanical solution, number one, other than the power consumption that we're not ready for either, the mechanical solution will limit how high you can go and what the densities are that you can get. So while everybody was running around during the moratorium conversation saying there is a solution, there is a solution, there is actually a limit to that solution as well. Closed loop hydronic systems are very, very, very expensive. It is still a mechanical cooling system. You still have condensers, you still have coils, you still have freon. It's just all on the ground, and you're circulating water through it. The only market sector right now that's using a closed loop system is wet chip data technology. So hyperscale data is using that closed loop mechanically cooled system. That's the only place that can afford it. It's hugely, hugely expensive. Pretty much every single company up and down the Las Vegas Strip has a high-rise designed right now. They all want to build more rooms, every one of them. I have a client that looks me straight in the face and says, you figure out how to mechanically cool this and we'll build it. The problem is that he needs a huge amount of real estate to provide the solution that would feed his 35-plus story tower. So he's constrained by land. Now we're back to the land use thing, right? I mean, comparatively, I think you and I were talking on the phone the other day, it's like a 1-to-5 ratio, 1-to-6 ratio. You need about 6 times the square footage of yard space, mechanical yard space for central plant for a mechanical system versus a water source system. Cooling tower pumps, boilers, chillers, the conventional water source system fits in a box, and that box is about 5 times the size to create the same tonnage of cooling that the water source system takes. And just isn't a casino, and again, you're back to land price, right? When you're spending $10 million an acre, you don't want to cover that with condensers. That's not smart. So there's only so many solutions out there, and so that's going to be a real challenge is these mechanically cooled systems.
So this is not a rhetorical question, this is a real question, just real quick. When you're driving along the I-15 and you see these giant concrete boxes with steam coming out of them in front of the casinos, are those these evaporative cooling systems?
Yeah, those are cooling towers.
So you're saying one of those versus 5 or 6 of non?
I'm just saying the square footage that it takes
right.
to house the physicality of it. And again, it all gets back to design. It all gets back to efficiency. It all gets back to land use. I mean, there's this just circular reference that goes on. Look, I am a strong believer that way, way, way intelligent people will figure out the issue with power. They'll figure out the issue with water. They'll figure out the issue with cooling. God's not making more land. And so it just, you know, I hate to keep beating that same dead horse, but that is the one that is the current reality that we're up against right now.
So you mentioned power. Now I want to get to power, and I realize, man, you know, it wasn't the intent. We're not trying to be Debbie Downer here, okay? We do realize that the next few years have some challenges, and that's why we're talking about these things. We have to talk about the difficult stuff in order to get to where we want to be 10 years from now. And all of us are optimists, and everybody in this room is optimists. And we'll get there, but it's important to talk about the next few years, and that's what we're doing here. So don't get discouraged and walk away having a bad rest of your day because we talked about a lot of challenges. But having said that, power, electricity. And this is, I'm going to take the arrow on this a bit. I'm involved with several redevelopment projects going on right now across the valley, and all we're doing is turning office buildings into retail and restaurants. As Guy said, you know, we call it adaptive reuse because we don't know what the hell else to call it. But a 4-acre site in Chinatown and a 9-acre site in Henderson, and restaurants need a lot more power than offices. I think that's pretty intuitive and common sense. For both of those projects, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to add EV chargers. Everybody needs EV chargers these days, and we wanted to add EV chargers, and we wanted to convert them. And obviously, EV chargers do not take a small amount of electricity. But we requested, or Tesla requested, or EV charger, these installers requested them, and for the request for the 4-acre site in Chinatown, which is, both of these projects are less than 100,000 square feet in total GLA, okay? So not huge sites. For the 4-acre Chinatown site, it was over $10 million just to get power to the site that we needed. And for the site in Henderson, it was $4.7 million just to get the power we needed to these sites. These are not expensive sites, and those don't pencil, so obviously, we're not building EV chargers at either one of those sites. Fortunately, several of those sites, several of the things that we needed, and they had enough power to provide some restaurants, but we had to scale back what we optimally wanted to do to deliver properties of the future. And that's just the reality of the power situation in mature submarkets and mature areas. A lot of those power stations are kind of at capacity, and that's the reality of it. So, and we weren't even trying to go vertical. So I guess that's a long-winded way of coming to this power conversation. When you guys are looking at infill, high-density conversions of existing sites, what's the percentage or fraction of the time that you need significantly more power than what is sitting there?
So, for us, one of the first things we do is look at availability of infrastructure. Again, you make that mistake 20 years ago and you never make it again, right? And luckily for me, I got caught on a smaller project with missing some infrastructure. So, it's really not that hard to figure out your capacities and understand what you have from the utility sources. So I would suggest, making sure you do it up front. Fortunately, along Maryland Parkway, we've been very lucky to have infrastructure there that's available. Downtown, some stuff we've looked at, not so much. And, but yes, depending, it will limit what you're doing for sure, because it completely throws your land basis off when you have a $3, $4, $6 million increase just to get power to the site.
Yeah, and I would say that, you look at some place like downtown Las Vegas, you cannot knock down enough single-family detached houses built in the 30s with 100 amp single-phase panels hanging on the back of them to power one high-rise tower. So it's not this culmination or sweep it all together. It just doesn't equate that way. You actually have to study all the way back to the substation. Right. And I'll stop the power conversation there at the risk. Envy Energy's in the room, and I like you guys. You're friends. Thank you.
Real quick, I'm going to mention traffic. There's a lot of a conversation to have when it comes to density and traffic, and we don't have the time to have it here. But a really broad question based on your guys' expertise and knowledge. In order for an area to really go high density and really take it on as the primary objective, do you think there needs to be an existing mass transit system in place? Or do they happen conjunctively? Especially in a place where it's over 100 degrees a third of the year or something like that.
I'll take a shot at this. I think in a normal city, the answer is absolutely. And I say a normal city, New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, high-density, high-rise vertical cities. I think it's super important to have that. In Las Vegas, however, because of the sheer cost of the occupancy cost of a high-rise project, say, whether I'm building student housing at UNLV or I'm looking at a mid-rise, high-rise project downtown, or around the peripheral, the rents to occupy those buildings are going to be of a higher earning occupant. They're going to have cars. So they're not going to rely on public transportation because we cannot, in this city, at least I haven't figured it out, build affordable high-rise. So if we're able to build affordable high-rise, then our occupants would use the transit more. But I think we're kind of in a weird conundrum when it comes to that.
And I would tag on, just born and raised in Las Vegas, and you can't have anything with the word infrastructure or mass in it and not have your property taxes go up, not have your sales tax go up, not have something touch you and your residents and your family. I mean, this isn't even a construction conversation. This is a family thing. It won't fix the problem. It won't make a project more appealing, and the period of time that it takes, your grandkids will ride on it, not you. Everything just moves too slow. The mass transit thing isn't a deal. If you look at places that have new mass transit, like Phoenix, for an example, coming out of Tempe and stuff, you look at Salt Lake, there's usually a trigger event. There's usually a huge federal subsidy or the Olympics. Something like that will come, and both are the same, by the way. It's just the Olympics happens faster and on a more set schedule than federal help does. So it just, you have to look at the trigger events around it, and it doesn't solve the problem. It's a great talking point for column inches of press, but it actually doesn't fix anything.
That's right. I mean, just as at a macro level, these guys are absolutely right. At the macro level, we also, I think, have to look at the evolution of a community, right, at the region. Southern Nevada, the Las Vegas metro area is relatively young. It was, started 100 years ago, let's say. And when you look at some of these other cities, it could be Atlanta, Phoenix is relatively new, but Atlanta, some of these cities back east that have these evolved mass transit systems and more diversified economies, it's taken them, many, many years to get there. So sometimes here, I've been here a little over almost 40 years, we have a tendency to say, hey, we built this resort on the Strip quickly, 18 months, 2 years, so we can evolve quickly too. And economies and regions take long periods of time to evolve and change. And with that comes growth and different types of jobs and different types of, of industries that come into your community, but it just takes time. And some of this is just growing pains that we're going through. And we're trying to sometimes maybe have the aspects of a big city, let's say like Chicago or Atlanta, whatever it is, but we're not there yet, of evolutionary-wise from a city standpoint. So we have to deal with those realities as well. And that's why some of the things that Guy was mentioning that don't move the needle, all right, because it takes time to get there, right? And so it's just the nature of and we also, let's be honest, decided 100 years ago we're going to put all our eggs in the resort tourism basket.
And I think that's the key factor.
That was it, and we were the only city in the country that had gaming and all these sorts of things, so it worked well for many years, but it also, I think, stymied us a little bit in terms of getting that economic resilience that other cities have with the different types of industries and jobs and universities and all these sorts of things. So that's something where that's just where we are.
Frank touched on affordability earlier, and when it comes to, we've said affordable housing, we've said attainable housing, we've used a lot of different words, and affordable kind of kicks in certain terminology and funding from municipalities. And I know that the couple high rises that we've got going on, I know that Symphony Park, for example, the condos that are for sale there, those start at $785,000 and go well into the millions of dollars per unit. The high rise in Henderson is beautiful, so I get it, but I think if you look on their website, the starting price is something like $5 million. It's around $5 million. Yeah, over $5 million a unit. So those aren't affordable housing, right? I can't afford them.
And certainly when you add in the HOA fees,
Right.
that people don't consider until
Right, that's
they're in,
huge.
and then they go, holy hell.
So my question is, when we use the word affordable and we're talking about high-density residential, is government subsidies involved? Are they always involved? To provide affordable housing within a giant tower, are there subsidies? How do we do that?
So I have clients that we're very blessed. We have clients west of the Rocky Mountains all the way to the water. And what I'll tell you is that any client that has ever operated within a municipality that stipulates the quantity of affordable housing in a development, it has only killed deals. There is not a single project that we have seen that we've worked on that has had a mandated affordability or rent fixed portion within. You guys hear rent fixing on the news, and it's a legislative conversation. There is not a single project that has come across our desk in the last 5 years in a municipality that already has that requirement that's ever moved forward. So the rent fixing doesn't work. And I want to be very careful to anybody that thinks, oh, the state needs to do more, the federal government needs to do more. Stop that right now. Because there are statutes and there are laws that trigger things like prevailing wage and things that trigger. There is no way, if I have a piece of dirt and the comp comes back at $4 million, but I got to stick $4 million in it to get power there, there is no statutory ability to offset the cost of that comp when I go to when the municipality goes to discharge that land. So there's no way for us to be able to sit down like you would a private developer, right? If you bought a challenged piece of dirt from a private developer and you said, I got to get rid of this sin of the site, and that's going to cost me $2.5 million. So I want you to participate in that, so we'll split it, right? And it comes off the price. There's no way to do that. So when the federal government or municipality discharges shit dirt, it's bad. There's no way to fix that. And sorry, that's probably going to get in a piece of paper someplace as a quote. I have a way of doing that sometimes. My bad. Sorry, Mom. But the reality of it is that so be careful. Be very, very, very careful what you ask for from institutionalized assistance. I'll just leave it at that.
Right. They become your partner really quick, whether inadvertently, and that triggers, to Guy's point, a lot of problems, hence why we have not built anything with assistance, although it would be nice, but it all comes with handcuffs.
One more question on the affordability part, and then I want to go back to office for a sec. We're talking about affordability. In cities, John, where high density is cranking, where it's really working out, where they've got a lot of high density mixed use properties, let's talk income levels. How do we compare in terms of our income levels in this town versus these other cities where it's going strongly?
We're way below. When you look at average household income, or we look at average weekly wage or average annual wage, all these indicators that we look at from an economic standpoint, we're relatively low. It's just the way it is. We're not a headquarters community. We don't have a large number of high-paid or well-paid white-collar workers like you would see in other cities that we quote-unquote compete with, and that's just a function of our economy. So that doesn't mean we can't get there, but it takes time. It takes time to evolve to be more of a white-collar community that with the incomes necessary to afford this kind of housing, right? And so when we look in that context of the income structure of our residents, on top of what we've been harping about here, land costs, it gets complicated really quick, right? And so we have to just deal with it, and it's just going to take time. And Guy's absolutely right. Government intervention. I'm not a conservative guy. I'm kind of a radical centrist. I don't see how government necessarily is a bad thing, but government sometimes does not know what the hell it's doing in terms of how the markets operate. And in trying to influence the market with government fiat or government regulations too much, doesn't do anything. The market's got to operate in its natural form. It's got to evolve. And that's why folks like Frank stay away from having a local government as part of their partners. You can't do it. It's a difficult thing. I know the intentions are good by government, local government, but oftentimes they get in the way with regulations, and that's at the state as well, and prevent the market from operating as efficiently as it could. There's nothing better than free market forces to move things along in the most efficient way. It's just the way it is.
And that really speaks to the importance when you hear LVGEA and GoEd and who they're trying to go after and what companies they're trying to bring to this town. This is why they say high-paying jobs, because we need to get there. And I think we're all pretty confident that we're headed that way. It doesn't take as long as infrastructure on transit, but it's not going to take 2 years.
Right.
To go back to office real quick, and then we're gonna wrap it up because we're at 9:05. I think of Salt Lake. Salt Lake is an incredibly strong office market. And Frank, you just built, it's one of the most beautiful buildings in the city out in the southwest, 4 or 5 stories, whatever it is. Any special insight there? Are we an office market? Was that a brilliant thing to do?
Was it brilliant? Absolutely not. I think any of us who built office since 2019 will say, hell no, it wasn't brilliant. Did we end up with a great product? Absolutely, and we're proud of the product and proud of our tenants, and it's a great building. Are we an office market? I think the answer is we are maturing into one, but we have a long way to go to catch up to Salt Lake in the sense of Salt Lake has a different workforce. So back to John's point earlier, our town was built on the casino industry, and our sprawl, our growth was built on supporting that industry. So we don't have the educated, higher-paying jobs as Salt Lake does. We are getting them. I think we are growing into it. But so I think we are in a good place as far as where we're trajecting in the office place. But it's going to take more time to mature and catch up with some of those more advanced cities that have more of a work pool to support these Class A buildings and higher-paying jobs.
And I completely agree. I think what we're seeing with the clients that come through our door right now with office specifically is trying to fit the niche of a change in our economic engine in Southern Nevada. So just one example, the film world, everybody talks about the studios, everybody sees the studios, but what you don't see is the millions of square feet of pre and post-production space that's also needed. Mm-hmm. So everybody sees the big, massive boxes, but there will literally be a whole sub-market to the movie industry for pre and post-production. Mm-hmm. And so that if we can be really dialed in and only react to the needs of a change in our economic engine, office could have a spot, but it'll have a home before we start building it. It'll have a tenant before it starts getting built. Mm-hmm. For a very specific use. Mm-hmm. That's just one example of how we can diversify our economy, and it would trigger into the office market.
I'm going to ask this one question. I don't know if this was on the question sheet, so if you're blindsided and you don't have an immediate answer, you can just say no comment. But we have a builder, an economist, and a developer up here. And so you each have very unique perspectives. And to get to where we want to be 10 to 15 years from now with, a diversified economy and high density and great mixed use projects, from each of your perspectives, what is the number one top priority that needs to happen faster than anything else to get to where we want to be 10 to 15 years from now?
I mean, my opinion, we need tradable land. We need land that's available to trade. You look at, again, I will reference Salt Lake and Phoenix specifically, Phoenix market. There is a lot of land that can be traded on a daily basis and big pieces of it, hence why there's so much economic growth there. And we need that here. We need to have free tradable land because vertical development, as much as I love it, I like it compared to a bus with rubber wheels versus steel on steel light rail. I'd rather be in the steel on steel, but it's not affordable, generally speaking. In certain places it works, but it's not the answer to our problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would echo the same thing. I say it this way all the time when we're in meetings with clients: fee simple land. Give me, you call it tradable land. It's fee simple land without a partner.
Yep.
Private sector development is the answer to this problem. Mm-hmm. And we need to figure out how to get large tracts of land in the hands of private development, fee simple. That's how we move forward.
At the right location, right? With the right utility.
Depending on the basis of the land, right? Yeah. I mean, if you can, I'll turn dirt into real estate, but you got to sell it to me at the price of dirt, not at the price of real estate.
Right.
That is the difference. So, yeah, the right price.
And the only thing I would add to what these guys said, that the land is absolutely at the most critical piece. And also too, because it takes time, again, the skills of the workforce. To have land here, let's say we had all the land that, for example, that Trek up in Reno, Tahoe Regional Industrial Center, which has got about 100,000 acres up there, right? To have that kind of land, but not have the skilled workforce to be attracted to a Tesla factory or whatever advanced manufacturing, whatever the hell that means these days, is coming here, or whatever we're going after. That not having that skilled workforce is also kind of critical. But at the core is the land, by far. Before anything else, it's the land. And the power issue now, right? So how do we,
And
that's solvable with enough money, I
That's
guess.
solvable. Like I said, somebody's got a 50-pound brain in a briefcase. A really, really, really intelligent person has the answer for power.
Yeah.
And you read articles about nuclear, you read articles about hydrogen cogen, you read articles about all of this stuff. Bear in mind, if you're reading about it in ENR and the ink is still wet, it's still 3 years old. They don't write about it till they figured it out, or they've ran it to an impasse. There are solutions out there, but again, who's got an extra 22 acres to put a hydrogen-fired cogen on? And who's got the stroke at Berkshire Hathaway to force NV Energy to buy back the power you don't use? You can just run that one to ground pretty fast, and that's the only reason they'll write about it is because they haven't figured it out. So, if it was figured out, you'd see them building it. But there are solutions out there.
Dan, question or two out there?
Yes, in one short hour, we have crushed the dreams of every UNLV student that wants to be a developer today.
Sorry.
And I'd like to thank, they were talked about in their organizations, Tom Burns and Betsy Fretwell, for being here today. Is it possible to add requirements for all land released or sold by the federal government? This is more discussion for anyone up there. By the federal government, where people can't land bank it and has to be developed in a quicker time frame.
We'll need another hour for that.
Yeah.
John's got an
If you
opinion.
guys want
I'm
it,
sure.
I'm sure everybody's walking away super excited.
John may have an opinion on that. And
There are some communities, I don't know if this answers your question directly, Danny, but there are certain communities that have decided around the country that they're going, and I don't know if this is a good answer or not a bad answer, just an answer. They've decided to charge higher rates of property taxes on vacant parcels than developed parcels, to encourage owners to move from a vacant parcel. And we see them all over the valley here, right? Just sitting there and not doing anything, not being productive, and moving it into production, whether it's for residential or commercial. So that's one approach, I guess. But these things are just very complicated. I mean, it is. I was saying earlier, government should try and government should not be so involved in development, but they can, with the right incentives, encourage things to happen a little quicker by the private sector through the incentive process. As we say in economics, incentives matter. Bad incentives or negative incentives or positive incentives. So if the government can just step out of the way and facilitate things, make it a little easier, that's one way to do it. But it's going to take time.
I'll give you one example, Dan, though, that we have to be careful with what we ask the state to do or what we ask the local government to do. There's actually a bill going through the legislature right now that says that, and I'm paraphrasing the hell out of a very, very long bill, if a local municipality participates in a contributory way to any value, it instantly becomes a prevailing wage job and they're instantly your partner.
Yep.
So let's say that sewer's not to the property, and you're a nonprofit, and the city wants to give you a piece of ground, and they figure out how to do that, which they can't. They figure out how to give you a piece of ground, and you go back to them and say, will you waive my permit fees? Seems like a pretty inert thing, right? Small dollar value, easy, instantly prevailing wage, job goes up 20%. Construction costs. So be careful what we ask any alphabet group to step in and help us with.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything other than fee simple is going to be really hard.
Right.
What's that, Dan?
I want to thank over the 300-plus people here. Steve, why don't you finish? And
Perfect. Thank you to our sponsor, American Nevada. Listen, it takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to speak the truth on hard conversations to your spouse, let alone hundreds of people. So I want to thank the panelists here. Please give them a round of applause for being up here. And just so everyone's aware, there's a lot of smart people working on all of these issues, and there's a lot of people in this room that will build anything that pencils, and we want to build as much as possible. So we'll figure it out, guys. I'm done. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks again
Thank
to
you.
our speakers, our breakfast meeting sponsor, American Nevada Realty, and for all of you for attending today's meeting. To the 21 students that came in the room today, we are talking about these topics because we want a future for you guys. Hope to see you all again here at the Orleans on May 22nd breakfast program. Until then, be safe and be well.